Caleb Turner began his morning the same way he had for years. He woke before the sun, washed his face with cold water from the barrel, and stepped outside to breathe the dry desert air of Arizona. His ranch stretched far across the open land, touched by the golden early light. Life out here was simple, quiet, and predictable. He worked alone, spoke little, and kept to himself. People in town knew him as a calm, solitary man who never caused trouble and never looked for it. But that morning, something different waited for him beside the narrow water channel that ran along the edge of his land. As Caleb walked toward the horse's pen, he noticed a shape crouched near the small stream that carried water from the hills. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a coyote or a deer, searching for water. But as he moved closer, the shape didn't run. Instead, it froze, almost shrinking into the earth. Caleb stopped, his boots sinking slightly into the dry soil. He narrowed his eyes. The figure was small, thin, and wrapped in worn, earth-colored cloth. Then it lifted its face. It wasn't an animal. It was a girl, an Apache girl. Her dark hair was tangled, falling across her cheeks. Dust covered her skin and clothes, and her breathing was shaky, as if every breath took effort. She looked both frightened and exhausted, as though she had been walking through the desert for days. Her eyes, large and alert, watched his every movement. She seemed ready to run but too tired to make it far. Caleb raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "You all right?" he asked in a gentle tone. The girl did not answer. She only stared at him, unsure whether he was a danger or a blessing. Caleb took one step closer, but she flinched. Clearly, fear held her like a tight rope. So he stopped again, and softened his voice even more. "I won't hurt you," he said. "I just want to know if you need help." Her eyes dropped to the small stream where her hands trembled above the water. She dipped her fingers again, trying to drink, but her hands were shaking too much. Caleb noticed the way her shoulders trembled. She looked close to collapsing. Something inside him, something deep and instinctive, told him she wasn't a threat. She was in trouble. "All right," he murmured, trying to think. "Hold on." He walked back to his horse, grabbed his canteen, and returned slowly. He crouched down, placing the canteen on the ground between them instead of handing it directly. He wanted her to see she had a choice. At first, she didn't move. Her eyes traveled from him to the canteen, studying every detail as if it were a trap. After a long pause, she reached out with careful fingers and pulled the canteen toward her chest. She lifted it, drank, and then coughed softly because her throat was too dry. Caleb waited patiently until she finished drinking. Only when she lowered the canteen did she try to speak. Her voice was so soft it could have been mistaken for wind across sand. "I can't," she whispered. But the rest of the words didn't come out. Caleb leaned slightly closer. "You can't what?" She swallowed, trying again. "I can't live without a man." Her words surprised him not because of the meaning, but because of the emotion behind them. She wasn't talking about romance. She wasn't making a strange confession. Her voice carried fear, a fear of being alone, unprotected, unable to survive in a world that was not safe for her. Caleb nodded slowly, understanding more than she could have explained. She was young, alone, tired, and possibly separated from her people. To survive the desert, a person needed shelter, water, and someone who knew the land. The girl lifted her head again. Her eyes held a quiet plea, not for possession, but for safety, for a chance to keep living. She was telling the truth in the only words she knew. "What's your name?" Caleb asked softly. She hesitated before answering, as if even her name carried weight. "Nayeli." "That's a good name," he replied with a calm smile. The girl lowered her gaze again, as though she didn't know how to respond. She looked ready to collapse at any moment. Caleb realized she wouldn't survive long if he left her here. He stood up and carefully held out his hand. Not too close. Not forcing her. Come with me. You can rest at my ranch. She stared at his hand for a long moment. Her breath quickened. Not with fear exactly, but with doubt. Doubt in herself. Doubt in trusting a stranger. But when the wind blew and dust stung her eyes, she realized she had no strength left to wander more. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Her touch was light, trembling. Almost unsure she had the right to accept help. Caleb didn't squeeze her hand. He only guided her gently toward the ranch. She followed him with quiet steps, walking weakly, her legs shaky from exhaustion. As they neared the ranch house, the horses lifted their heads, curious about the new presence. Nayeli flinched at the sudden movements of the animals, but Caleb turned to reassure her. They won't harm you, he said softly. Inside the ranch house, he offered her a seat near the wooden table. She sat very slowly, as if trying not to disturb anything. Her eyes scanned the room, studying every object. Walls, shelves, the stove, the buckets. Everything was unfamiliar to her. Caleb poured water into a small cup and set it in front of her. She looked at it, then at him, wondering if he expected something in return. You don't owe me anything, he said gently. Drink, rest, that's all. She sipped the water carefully, both hands around the cup as if it were precious. After a few minutes of silence, she spoke again, her voice still quiet and fragile. I walk, many days, she said slowly, her English broken but clear enough. No food, no family, no people. Caleb listened without interrupting. He could hear the pain, hidden between her words. I think I die, she whispered. But you didn't, he replied. You made it here. Nayeli lowered her eyes. Only because you stop. Caleb didn't know how to answer that. He wasn't used to someone depending on him, especially not someone as vulnerable and uncertain as this girl. But he felt a responsibility not forced, not unwanted, but natural, as if brought to him by circumstance. She touched her chest lightly. Caleb leaned back in his chair, thinking. You can stay here, he said at last. At least until you feel stronger. Her eyes lifted, hopeful and frightened at the same time. Stay. Here, he nodded. Yes, I won't send you away. She pressed her lips together, trying to hold back tears of relief. The weight on her shoulders seemed to soften just a bit. She wasn't safe forever, but she was safe for now. Later, Caleb showed her a small spare room at the back of the house. It was simple, just a bed, a small shelf, and a blanket, but to someone who had slept under the open sky for days, it looked like comfort beyond imagination. Nayeli stepped inside slowly, almost afraid to touch anything. She placed her hand on the edge of the bed, testing its softness. Then, she looked back at Caleb, unsure if she was really allowed to stay. It's yours, he said gently. Rest as much as you need. She nodded once, a slow, grateful motion. As he turned to leave the room, she whispered softly, almost to herself, Thank you, Caleb. He paused at the doorway, surprised by how strongly the simple words touched him. He hadn't expected gratitude. He had only tried to do what felt right. He gave her a quiet nod and closed the door softly. Outside, the sun continued its slow climb over the desert. The ranch looked the same as it always had, but something inside the house, something inside Caleb's life, had changed. A tired, gentle Apache girl had arrived at his ranch with a whisper of fear and hope mixed together, and he had let her remain. The next morning, Caleb woke before sunrise, just as he always did. But as he stepped into the kitchen, he paused in surprise. Someone was already there. Nayeli stood near the stove, her slender form outlined by the soft morning light coming from the small window. She wasn't cooking, she didn't know how to use the stove, but she was carefully placing clean dishes back on the shelf, sorting them with gentle movements, as if each piece might break at the slightest touch. She turned the moment she heard Caleb's steps. Her shoulders stiffened, and she dipped her head quickly, almost like she feared she had done something wrong. "I clean," she said softly. "I wake early. Help." Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. He hadn't expected her to start working so soon. "You don't have to do all that," he replied gently. "You're tired. You should rest." Nayeli shook her head firmly, surprising him. "I stay. I must work," she said, her English slow but certain. "I must not be trouble." Her words made something tighten in his chest. She wasn't helping because she wanted to impress him. She was helping because she feared being a burden, because she thought she needed to prove her right to stay. Caleb stepped closer and spoke calmly. "You are not trouble. You don't have to earn a place here." Her eyes lifted to his, uncertain, as if the idea of simply being allowed to exist safely was new to her. He offered her a warm smile. "But, if you want to help, I won't stop you." Nayeli relaxed a little, the tension in her shoulders softening. She smiled, just a small one, but it was the first real smile he had seen from her. After breakfast, Caleb went out to the horses. Nayeli followed him quietly, staying a few steps behind as she watched everything with careful eyes. He showed her how to scoop, feed, and pour water into the troughs. She mimicked each motion precisely, like someone afraid to make a mistake. But she learned quickly. Within minutes, she was helping with steady hands. "You're doing fine," Caleb said. Her eyes brightened with pride at the simple praise. As the sun rose higher, he took her around the ranch, pointing to different tasks and explaining things in simple words she could understand. She listened with full attention, nodding often, repeating some words under her breath so she could remember them. When a horse nudged her shoulder, she jolted back in alarm, but Caleb placed his hand gently on her arm. "He's only greeting you," he said softly. "They know you're new." She slowly reached out her hand, touching the horse's neck. The animal snorted, but accepted her. A soft smile appeared on her face again. The hours passed quietly. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful for a girl who had lived in uncertainty for days. While they worked, Caleb noticed something every time he walked a little too far. She would take a few hurried steps to stay close. Not clingy, not scared of him, but scared of being alone even for a moment. Eventually, she whispered, "I learn. The ranch. Then I not be alone outside." Her simple explanation made sense. She wasn't depending on him blindly. She was learning how to survive on her own, but in a place where she didn't feel abandoned. Around midday, he took her inside for lunch. She didn't sit down until he gestured for her to. She didn't start eating until he started. Everything she did was cautious, respectful, as if she was scared of crossing invisible lines. "You don't have to be so careful," Caleb said between bites. "This is your place too now." She looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "My place?" "Yes," he said gently. She lowered her gaze, touched by the words. "I have not home for long time," she whispered. After they finished eating, she insisted on washing the dishes again. Caleb wanted to stop her, but he could tell it made her feel useful. So he let her continue. She worked quietly, humming a soft tune under her breath, something that sounded like it came from her people. It brought a warm feeling to the house. Later in the afternoon, they walked to the edge of the ranch to check the fence line. The desert wind blew lightly, lifting the loose strands of her hair. She walked beside him, her steps more confident than the day before. As they checked the wooden posts, she finally began talking about herself, though her words came slowly. "My family." She hesitated, searching for the right English. "They move many times, far places, hard life. Caleb listened quietly. One day, we walk. No water. No food. Her voice lowered to almost a whisper. People scared. People fight. People scatter. He didn't ask for details. He didn't want her to relive pain. She wasn't ready to share. She took a deep breath and continued. I walk alone. Many days. I think I fall. I think. She paused, then whispered, I think I disappear. Caleb nodded. You didn't disappear. You survived. She looked up at him with soft wonder, as if the idea had never occurred to her. Yes, I survive. You're strong, Caleb added. Her eyes softened in gratitude, but she didn't say anything. The simple praise seemed to mean more to her than long speeches ever could. As the sun began to sink in the sky, they reached the far end of the property. The town was visible in the distance, small buildings, people moving about, dust lifting in the warm breeze. Nayeli stopped walking. Her face changed. Her body went still, and her eyes fixed on the town with a mix of curiosity and fear. Caleb noticed. Something wrong? She pointed toward the town slowly, her hand trembling. People there, they not like me. Caleb gave her a thoughtful look. Some don't understand different people, he said, choosing his words carefully. But not everyone is unkind. Nayeli shook her head. In town, I hide. People look. People whisper. They not want me near. Caleb sighed quietly. He knew she wasn't wrong. The world was not always warm to outsiders, especially someone like her. You don't have to go to town, he said gently. Nayeli lowered her hand, relieved. She didn't want conflict. She didn't want fear. She just wanted a place where she didn't have to run. On their way back to the ranch, she walked closer to Caleb than before, not out of dependence, but out of comfort. A quiet trust was growing between them, the kind that forms slowly and silently. When they returned to the house, Caleb prepared a simple dinner. Nayeli helped by cutting vegetables with careful hands, watching him to copy his movements. She giggled quietly when she cut something the wrong way, and Caleb smiled at the soft sound. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. After dinner, he stepped outside to check the sky. The stars were appearing, one by one, shining brightly in the clear night. Nayeli stood beside him silently, her hands clasped together. Beautiful, she whispered. Caleb nodded. It is. I watch stars with family, she said softly. Long time ago. He glanced at her. You can watch them here too, any night you want. She nodded slowly, almost gratefully, as if the offer meant more than he could guess. After a few minutes, she turned to him and said in a gentle voice, Caleb, today I feel safe. He felt something warm stir inside him at her words. I'm glad. I learn, she continued softly. Caleb looked into her eyes, seeing both strength and fear, hope and uncertainty. Nayeli, he said, you don't have to ask. You can stay. I already told you you're not alone here. She took a small breath, her eyes shining faintly in the starlight. Then, I stay. He smiled. Good. Just then, the distant sound of horses came from the direction of the road. Two silhouettes moved in the fading light, riders heading toward town. Nayeli stiffened immediately, stepping back cautiously. Caleb noticed and gently shook his head. They're just riders, not coming here. Even so, she stayed near the door, watching until the silhouettes disappeared completely. Her fear wasn't of people in general, it was fear of being found, taken, or rejected again. Fear of belonging nowhere. Caleb turned toward the house. Come on, let's rest. Long day tomorrow. Nayeli followed him inside, but before entering her small room, she paused. She looked at him with soft, grateful eyes, and said the words that settled deep into his heart. Thank you for letting me remain. Caleb nodded once, simple and sure. You're safe here, Nayeli. And with that promise, she stepped into her room, closing the door gently behind her, knowing this was the first night in a long time she wouldn't have to sleep afraid. The next few days passed peacefully on the ranch, but the quiet did not last. The world outside, with all its opinions and misunderstandings, slowly made its way toward Caleb and Nayeli. The morning began like any other. Caleb was repairing a loose board on the fence, hammering steadily in the warm sun, while Nayeli gathered hay into a neat bundle nearby. She moved with calm focus, her steps light, her eyes bright with a sense of belonging. She had become comfortable here, more comfortable than she had been in a long time. Every day, she woke early, helped with chores, and slowly learned English words with simple patience. "Good job with the hay," Caleb said as he walked toward her. Nayeli smiled softly, brushing dust from her hands. "I learn," she replied. "Little by little." "You're doing great," he said, and she lowered her head with quiet pride. But as they worked, a cloud of dust formed in the distance near the road. Caleb squinted his eyes, recognizing the shapes of 3 riders approaching the ranch. Their silhouettes were sharp against the sun, their horses moving at a steady pace. Nayeli noticed Caleb's expression change. She followed his gaze, and the moment she saw the riders, her body stiffened. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the bundle of hay closer to her chest. Caleb walked a little closer to her. "Stay behind me," he said gently. "It's all right. 1. Over. 1. 1. She nodded, but her breathing grew unsteady. She didn't know who these men were or what they wanted. All she knew was that whenever people approached, trouble often followed. The riders slowed as they reached the front of the ranch. Caleb recognized 2 of them, men from town who often spoke more than they listened. The third was a younger ranch hand from across the valley. The oldest rider, a broad-shouldered man with a thick mustache, cleared his throat. "Morning, Caleb." Quote, "Morning," Caleb replied, keeping his voice calm. The man's eyes shifted toward Nayeli, who stood silently behind Caleb, her hands pressed together nervously. "Word in town says you're keeping an Apache girl here." Caleb kept his posture relaxed, though his muscles tensed slightly. "That may be," the man replied, "but people in town are uneasy. We don't know her. Folks are asking if it's safe." Nayeli lowered her head even more, as if shrinking under their words. Her shoulders curled inward. She wasn't dangerous, but she could feel their judgment like a heavy weight. Caleb took a slow breath and chose his words carefully. "She's not causing trouble. She's just trying to survive." The younger rider looked at Nayeli curiously. "She speaks English?" Nayeli didn't answer. She stared at the ground, afraid to meet his eyes. Caleb stepped a little to the side so he was still shielding her, but also showing calm confidence. "She speaks some. She's learning." The older man shook his head. "Caleb, you're a good man. But this isn't wise. People will talk more. You'll get yourself pulled into things you don't need." Caleb's voice was steady. "Let them talk." Another rider chimed in. "We're not trying to start anything. We're just warning you." "I understand," Caleb said. "But she's staying here. She's safe here. That's all." The men exchanged glances. No one wanted a fight or an argument, and Caleb wasn't raising his voice or showing anger. He was simply firm, calm, but unmovable. Finally, the older man tugged on his reins. "Fine. Just be careful. People can be uncomfortable with things they don't understand." Caleb nodded once. "I know." The men turned their horses around and started riding back toward town. Dust rose behind them, the sound of hooves slowly fading. Nayeli remained still, long after they were gone. Her breathing was shallow, and her hands shook slightly. Caleb turned to her. "You okay?" She nodded weakly, but her eyes were filled with fear and guilt. "They not want me here." "That's not true," Caleb replied softly. They just don't understand. Her voice was a whisper, fragile and heavy. I bring trouble to you. You didn't bring trouble, he said firmly. They came because they don't know you. That's all. She looked at him with worried eyes. If you want, I leave. Caleb shook his head. I don't want you to leave. Her lips trembled as she whispered. But they angry. They think bad things. Let them think what they want, Caleb said, his tone calm but sure. This is my ranch. I choose who stays. She lowered her head. But this time, tears began to gather in her eyes. She wiped them quickly with the back of her hand, trying not to let him see. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want to be a burden. Caleb stepped closer. Nayeli, look at me. She lifted her eyes slowly. You're safe here, he said gently, and you're not leaving because of what someone else says. Her breath shook. But I make you trouble. Nayeli, he replied softly, you make this place feel less empty. Her eyes softened at his words, and she took a shaky breath. I try to stay strong. I know you do, he said. But the morning's encounter left a lingering shadow in her thoughts. She lived the rest of the day quietly. She continued chores, worked with steady hands, and followed Caleb around the ranch like usual. But her steps were slower, her eyes distant. She kept glancing toward the road, as if expecting more riders to appear and take her away. Around sunset, Caleb was tending the horses while she carried a bucket of water to the chickens. Everything seemed normal until he looked up and realized she wasn't there anymore. The bucket sat on the ground where she had left it halfway through her task. Caleb frowned. Nayeli? He called. No answer. He walked toward the house, expecting to find her inside, but her room was empty. The blanket was neatly folded, and the small wooden comb he had given her earlier lay on the table. His heart tightened. She had left. He rushed to the porch, scanning the land. In the fading light, he spotted a small figure walking away across the open desert, moving slowly, but determinedly. Caleb grabbed his hat and ran to his horse. With one quick motion, he mounted and rode toward her, dust rising behind him. Nayeli heard the sound of hooves and stopped walking. She didn't turn around until he was only a few steps away. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, not fear. Why did you leave? He asked, dismounting quickly. She held her hands together tightly. I not want people angry with you. I not want you in trouble because of me. 2. Caleb stepped closer. You don't get to decide that alone. She blinked, confused. I try to protect you. And I'm trying to protect you, he said softly. Nayeli looked away, her voice barely a whisper. I think, if I go, you have quiet life again. No people talking. No trouble. Caleb shook his head. My life was quiet. Yes. But it was also empty. Her eyes lifted slowly. Empty? Yes, he replied. You brought something good here, even if you don't see it. You work hard. You're honest. You're trying to build a life again. And you're not leaving it behind because someone else doesn't understand. Nayeli swallowed a lump in her throat. Her voice trembled. But I am scared. Goad. I know, Caleb said softly. But you don't have to be scared alone. The wind blew gently across the desert, carrying the quiet between them. Nayeli wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You come for me, she whispered, as if the idea amazed her. I always will, he said simply. She took a small step toward him. Then, I come back. He nodded and offered his hand. She placed her hand in his, just as she had the first time he found her. But this time, the touch carried trust, not fear. They walked back to the ranch together, side by side, the stars slowly appearing above them. Nayeli held onto his hand for a moment longer, as if confirming she was really allowed to stay. And Caleb didn't let go. The night after Caleb brought Nayeli back from the desert was quiet. The stars were bright, and the ranch was peaceful again. Yet, Something had changed. There was a new understanding between them. A quiet trust that had grown stronger after everything that happened. The next morning, Nayeli woke early as usual. But when she stepped out of her room, she paused. Caleb was already sitting at the table with 2 cups of warm tea. He wasn't working or fixing something as he normally did. He was waiting. He looked up and gave her a gentle smile. "Morning, Nayeli." She bowed her head slightly. "Good morning, Caleb." He gestured for her to sit. She sat slowly, unsure why he had prepared breakfast for both of them before she even woke. "I want to talk to you," he said softly. Her hands tightened on her cup, though her expression stayed calm. Listen." Caleb took a slow breath. "Yesterday, when you left without telling me. That scared me." Her eyes lowered. "It wasn't better," Caleb said gently. "I need you to understand that." She looked up, surprised by the firmness in his voice. "You need me?" "Yes. Not because you owe me anything. Not because you're doing chores. Not because I feel sorry for you." He leaned forward slightly. "You make this place feel alive." Nayeli blinked, absorbing his words slowly, carefully. Caleb nodded. "Before you came, the ranch was just work, just days repeating. Now, there's someone to talk to. Someone to help. Someone to teach." He paused, then added softly, "Someone who smiles." Nayeli lowered her gaze again, but a shy warmth spread across her face. Her hands relaxed around the cup. "I thought I only bring trouble," she whispered. "You bring company," Caleb replied, "and peace." She stayed quiet for a moment, her breathing soft and steady. Then she nodded once. "I understand." After breakfast, they stepped outside to begin the day's work. Nayeli followed him with her usual careful steps, but she felt lighter. She wasn't walking behind him anymore, she walked beside him. The horses greeted them with soft snorts. Nayeli approached them with more confidence now, patting their necks and whispering small words she hoped sounded calming. Caleb watched, with a small smile. "You've gotten good with them," he said. Nayeli looked proud. "They know me now. They trust you," Caleb added. She glanced at him with a quiet smile. "Like you, trust me." He nodded. "Exactly." As the sun rose higher, they worked side by side. Caleb fixed the fence, while Nayeli swept the barn floor. She hummed again soft melodies from her memories, and every time Caleb heard her voice, he felt something warm in his chest. By midday, they returned inside for a small lunch. Nayeli prepared most of it herself this time, copying the way Caleb chopped vegetables and heated bread. She placed the food on the table with care, almost ceremony. "I learn," she said simply. "And you're learning fast," Caleb replied. She smiled shyly and sat down. But just as they began eating, a knock sounded at the door. Nayeli's body tensed instantly. Her hand froze over the plate. She looked at Caleb, eyes wide. He touched her arm softly. "It's all right." When he opened the door, he found an older woman from town, Mrs. Hargreaves, known for talking too much and worrying too often. She held a small basket of apples and bread. "Caleb Turner," she greeted politely, her eyes flicking past him into the house. "I heard you've got company." Caleb kept his tone calm. "I do." She handed him the basket. "This is a gift. I thought maybe she could use some fresh food." Caleb blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected kindness. "Thank you." The woman gave a small nod. "Some folks may talk, but not everyone is against the girl. If she needs anything, let me know." Caleb felt a quiet sense of relief. "I appreciate that." Mrs. Hargreaves didn't stay long. She turned, waved politely, and left. When Caleb closed the door, Nayeli looked up at him with confusion. Why she bring that? She wanted to help, he said, placing the basket on the table. Nayeli touched an apple gently, as if it were something rare. No, Caleb replied. Nayeli's eyes softened with relief. The world, which had felt so harsh for so long, was finally showing her a small piece of kindness. They finished their meal, and Nayeli helped clean the dishes again. But she wasn't quiet anymore. She hummed, she asked small questions. She even laughed once when Caleb dropped a spoon and pretended it was the spoon's fault. In the afternoon, they walked to the far side of the ranch to check the water troughs. The sun was warm, but not harsh, and the breeze carried the scent of sagebrush. Nayeli walked confidently now, her steps steady and sure. She looked around the land with calm eyes, not fearful ones. "This place is big," she said softly. "It is," Caleb replied. "Too big for one person." She looked at him gently. "Not too big for 2 people." Caleb nodded, feeling something settle peacefully inside him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. As they continued walking, Nayeli glanced toward the open desert. It no longer felt like a threat. It felt like part of her past, something she survived. "I want to stay long," she said suddenly, her voice low but steady. Caleb stopped and turned to her. "Stay as long as you want. This is home for you." She took a breath, her eyes shining with soft emotion. "Home," she repeated, as if testing the word on her tongue. "I not have home for long time." "You have one now," Caleb said. They walked back slowly, taking their time. When they reached the porch, Nayeli sat on the steps and looked at the sky, which was turning golden with evening light. Caleb sat beside her. The world felt calm. After a moment, Nayeli spoke very softly. "Caleb, the first day, I say something." He remembered clearly. He nodded. "I remember." She turned her head slightly, her dark hair moving gently with the breeze. "I say." "Yes," he replied quietly. "I knew you meant safety. Survival." She nodded slowly. "I say those words because I am scared. Because I am alone. Because I think I disappear if no one help me." Caleb listened in silence, giving her space to speak. "But now," she whispered, looking at the sunset. "Now, the words mean something different." He waited, his heart beating a little slower, a little deeper. She turned to him, her eyes gentle and steady. "Now it means, I stay because I feel safe with you, because you give me life again, because I am not alone." Caleb felt emotion rise in his chest. He didn't reach for her or say anything dramatic. He just spoke with quiet honesty. "I'm glad you stayed." Nayeli smiled softly, a warm, peaceful smile. Then she looked at the horizon and whispered again, completing the words she once left unfinished. "I can't live without a man," she said softly. "Not because I am weak, but because you show me I can live without fear." Caleb nodded. "And you can stay as long as you want. I won't ever send you away." Quote. Nayeli relaxed, her shoulders easing, her breath calm. She leaned back slightly, letting the evening breeze brush her face. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across the ranch. The horses settled. The wind grew gentle. The sky filled with soft colors. Nayeli and Caleb sat side by side, not needing many words, comfortable in the simple truth that life had changed for both of them. The ranch was no longer just Caleb's. It belonged to both of them now, 2 people who found peace in each other's quiet presence. And as night slowly wrapped around the land, Nayeli whispered one last time, just loud enough for him to hear, "Thank you for letting me remain." And Caleb, in his calm, steady way, simply answered, "You're home."